As I believe with regards to many issues, that both the Haredi camp on the one hand and the majority, at least, of the Dati Lomi camp on the other hand, are mistaken. The Haredi camp always stresses that there can be no geula of any sort, in other words, no significant, meaningful progress in Am Yisrael's situation can be made without teshuvah, and their version of teshuvah is a very, shall we say, thoroughgoing and black and white type of teshuvah. One suspects that they would not accept that Am Yisrael has done teshuvah until every single person is attired like as they are attired. One seems to pick. This seems to be the impression that one receives. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, not that I have anything against Haredi attire. By the way, everyone may dress as they please, and but that is not necessarily the only possible way to attire oneself. On the other hand, the Dati Lomi world, following in the footsteps of Rav Tzvi Kook, has gone to extreme lengths, as Rav Tzvi did in his articles on this topic, as I mentioned, to completely gloss over and ignore this fact, this statement of Rambam here, and that which is based again on an explicit statement in the Talmud and in Masechet Yoma, and this is also strange. The insistence that geula is possible based on without any significant, meaningful awakening, spiritual awakening within Am Yisrael is also a strange claim, and particularly so when you look into the Suryot, which we won't do right now, and you discover that much of these teachings are based on inaccurate texts, inaccurate girsaot, and therefore inaccurate perushim on those girsaot, on those texts, inaccurate understandings or misleading understandings. This whole shita is most definitely problematic. Rambam makes it very clear, as does Rabbeinu Saadia Gaon, that, namely, this is how it will be. Rabbi Eliezer makes this statement, that the various thoroth and difficulties that Am Yisrael will encounter will, as it were, force their hand, and they will have no choice but to do teshuvah. Yes, it would be preferable if Am Yisrael were to do teshuvah without that necessity, without it being forced on them. But that is the expectation, because we are an Am Cheshe Oref, and it is more than likely this is how things will be. Teshuvah, at any rate, is an essential ingredient in the geula. So Rambam here writes explicitly. That is what Rabbi Eliezer says explicitly, and his opinion is repeated a number of midrashim, and in the Talmud Yerushalmi, his opinion in Masechet Ta'aniyot, the beginning, is seems to be the conclusion of the discussion there in the Talmud. So Rambam's statements here are based on both the Talmud Bavli and the Talmud Yerushalmi and many midrashim.
Rabbi?
Yes.
Do you think there are other, if not correct, but reasonable ways to understand the sources as they are, to explain the position of the Dati Lomi camp? Or is there a deeper underlying reason why they don't view the reality in this way?
I believe that Rav Tzvi Kook was focused on, some might even say obsessed with, teaching and convincing people that the establishment of Israel, the country, the state of Israel, and the change in the Jewish people's national condition, which is a fact, That doesn't mean everything is perfect by any means, but it's a fact that something very significant, something that had not occurred for roughly 2,000 years, has in our times occurred, and that one can trace the connection between various statements in the Torah and in the Nevi'im to current affairs, as it were, recent historical events. And Rav Tzvi was very adamant about stressing this point, to the extent that I recall Rav Oded Volansky, whose shiurim in such matters on Rav Kook and Rav Tzvi's writings I used to attend very religiously for a period of time when I was a younger student, and also for at least a short time after I got married in Yeshivat Mekaz Rav. I remember him telling me that, as is well known, on the day known as Yom HaAtzmaut, in Mekaz Rav to this day, they have what they call an atzeret. They have a big to-do, and they invite various rabbanim, and speeches are made, and they usually are very insistent that whoever happens to be the prime minister of the day shows up as well and says something. And the same thing is done on Yom Yerushalayim. These are two very big, also events that were covered in the media, televised usually, what have you. I personally, after a few years, I could no longer stomach it, and I no longer attended these gatherings. But the fact is that the yeshiva made a very big deal of these events, and they are a fixture in Israeli society, one can say. So, in the year Tavshin Pethwell, 1955, this individual, Rav Oded Volansky, said to me that, of course, the Rabbanim that are invited to speak can also change with the times. So at that time, there was a famous Rav, whose name was Rav Yosef Zevin. You may have heard of him. A very great and unique Talmid Chacham. And Rav Tzvi was on very good terms with him. If I'm not mistaken, Rav Yosef Zevin used to participate in a minyan in the early years of Israel's history. A minyan that was held and established by Harav Maimon, the head of Mossad Rav Kook. There was also Sarah Datoth, Minister of Religions, as it's called. I'm not sure that somehow, for whatever reason, I'm not sure that covers the current state religion of Yitzhak Amit and his fellow criminals, the progressive, atheist, humanist religion. For some reason, it's not included in the purview of Misrad Datoth. That's something quite mysterious that needs to be looked into. But Rav Maimon was the head of Mossad Rav Kook. He was also Sarah Datoth, as I say, and there was and still is an institution known as Mossad Rav Kook, which is a publishing house today. Curiously enough, completely run by Haredim. At any rate, yeah, it's one of those interesting quirks of history, but it's a fact. So Rav Maimon was of the opinion that Hallel should be recited on Yom HaAtzmaut. I believe this was also at night. At any rate, let's say it was only in the morning initially. I'm not quite sure. With the bracha, and he was unhappy with the psak of the Rabbanut Harashit of the time of Rav Herzog, that and maybe those who followed, who until Rav Goren expressed a different opinion many years later. But the Rabbanut Harashid has never changed its opinion on this matter, that the Hallel should be recited on Yom Ha'atzmaut without a bracha. And certain people, like Rav Zemin, did not agree with this, and they were very happy to participate in a minyan where Hallel was recited with a bracha, and such a minyan took place against the position of the Rabbanut Harashid in Mosad Rav Kook, which is exactly a 2.5-minute walk from Merkaz Harav. And it's interesting to discuss what Rav Tzvi's opinion or view on the matter was, but for now, the point I'm making is as follows, that Rav Zevin was also invited, probably in a number of times, I don't know, to speak at this atzeret, in this gathering in Merkaz Harav in the evening, the Leil Yom Ha'atzmaut. So this individual, Rav Volansky, related to me that in Telshin Tethwell, 1955, he made the statement in his speech that Anachnu be'athalta de Geula, we are in the early stages of the Geula, which is a statement which needs to be examined and can be discussed, and one can either take it or leave it, I think, because there is no clear definition of athalta de Geula. It's not something you can really define. So a person can either concur or demur. And when Rav Yehudah got up to speak after Rav Zevin, he explicitly disagreed with Rav Zevin. He said, we're not in the beginning of the Gula, we're in the middle. Which is also an interesting statement. How exactly you know and how you define this. I don't have a device which can measure such things, and I'm not sure how others think they do, but anyhow, that's what he told me. In other words, the point of this was to explain that Rav Yehudah was very, very adamant that people relate to the current reality, even way back then, as already a clearly advanced stage of the Geula. And to that end, I think that he saw in the sources what he wished to see. This is not, it shouldn't be unusual in anyone's eyes that this happens all the time. In exactly the same way, the Rebbe Satmar saw in the sources what he wished to see, and presents the view of the Rambam, for example, as he wishes to see it, based on certain sources in the Rambam, and certain statements in the Rambam, which it's clear, for example, that Rambam later changed his mind about. So, in general, many people, including many Chachamim, fall into this trap of, in English today we refer to it as confirmation bias. That's the term that people have come up with. And that's basically what we're talking about, confirmation bias. This is true with regards to many, maybe even most Chachamim, on many, perhaps most issues. And this is a problem. It's a difficult thing to avoid, because human nature is so. One has to be very much on one's guard, and one has to be very, very rigorous intellectually and honest to not fall into that trap. And often it's difficult for example, for younger people to do that. Perhaps with age, people can see things through different or various types of spectacles. So that's how I understand it. At any rate, there's no question, returning to the Rambam here, there is no question. The Rambam states, here it is in front of us, black and white, Halacha He, Perek Zayin, Hilchot Teshuvah, En Yisrael Nicholim Ela B'Teshuvah, Ukvar Hivtih HaTorah, Shesof Yisrael La'asot Teshuvah, B'Sof Galutan. This is how events will play out. And to somehow pay some kind of lip service to these kinds of statements, or the Shita of Rabbi Eliezer, Rav Tzvi, for example, used to claim that the return of Am Yisrael to Eretz Yisrael itself is a part of the process of Teshuvah, which is a rather vague and unsubstantiated claim.
There are
I'm not saying there's nothing in that claim, but I don't think one can seriously believe that the very fact of returning to Eretz Yisrael in and of itself, even though the person does so entirely based on a non-Torah or anti-Torah perspective, can be really considered a kind of teshuvah, unless you wish to claim it's some kind of subconscious and historical type of teshuvah, which will only become clear and discernible in the fullness of time, which you could claim. But again, that's a claim. It's not clear. It's not clear. It's all very. It's very vague. B'kitzur, what I'm claiming is that Rav Tzvi Kook Zetzal went out on a limb to make such claims and to maintain such positions. You were saying something.
I was going to say there are a number of places in Sefer Yechezkel which seem to indicate that returning to Eretz Yisrael and Teshuvah are not one and the same, and that one precedes the other.
Yes, I would tend to agree, without going into the Pesukim in great detail now.